but in particular, that of opioids. My predecessor started us down this road to look at how opioids were affecting our community. This addiction to opioids knows absolutely no bounds. It affects any race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, and it has ravished our community. Many of us know someone who has lost a loved one, who has had collateral consequences from an addiction, who's faced addiction themselves. But also it's impacted those that may not actually have a face to an addiction from opioids. For instance, all of us that are taxpayers in our community. To tell the story behind that and how it matters to every single one of us in this community, let me explain that when distributors, manufacturers were handing out opioids, the impression was, oh, they're not addictive. Nothing could be further from the truth. We thought these drugs were safe, and they were not. The tragedy that has wreaked on so many families, citizens, community members. But again, going back to how it affects us, even if you don't know somebody or not have personally been impacted by such an epidemic as the opioid crisis in our community. It's sad to say, but there's been more children that have ended up in foster care because of this. Law enforcement has been impacted. Our sheriffs, our law enforcement partners have had to learn how to respond to people that are addicted, that are on our streets, that are committing crimes, has impacted our criminal justice system with the amount of cases that we have coming through and how we address those who have committed crimes, hold them accountable, but also give them the help they need. Teachers have had to report children who have been neglected from a caregiver with opioid addiction, and even our medical examiner's office has increased workload because of this. So I'm proud to say that we reached an agreement with some of these pharmaceutical companies. And at my recommendation, the Board of Supervisors signed on to this agreement. Maricopa County is the first jurisdiction to do so. Arizona is the first state in the United States to reach a settlement with the companies that have manufactured and distributed opioids into our community, ravishing it. We did not take the decision lightly to enter into litigation on a national level. And as horrible as this epidemic due to opioids is, not all social problems can be addressed by lawsuits. A few local governments had filed claims against some of the manufacturers and distributors of prescription opioids back in 2013, and at the time we were skeptical. And like I said, my predecessor, Bill Montgomery, now Justice Montgomery, believed that for the sake of Maricopa County and our residents, that we at least needed to explore the possibility of litigation. And under my administration as your county attorney, I'm proud that we have a true leader of our civil division, Tom Liddy, who is joining me here today, who you'll hear from. He first met with our lawyers, our outside counsel, opposing counsel that were all handling the opioid cases back in the summer of 2014. And over the next few years, he and his team investigated the claims and allegations surrounding this epidemic. And upon learning more, it became obvious that this was not some natural occurring disaster. This was a man-made problem. We realized that those who created this situation needed to be held accountable to our people, to our citizens. So we filed a complaint in December of 2018, 4 years after the initial discussions and investigation began into possible litigation. Now, the impact of this epidemic from opioids is staggering. In the last 4 years, the Arizona Department of Health Services has reported 11,000 Arizonans have died of opioid overdose. It is the leading cause of death for Americans under the age of 50. From 2002 to 2016, fatal overdoses of the street version of opioids, heroin, it increased by 533%. It's unbelievable. Prescription opioids, those tripled between 1991 and 2011. The sales of this addictive pharmaceutical drug has increased 10 times to what they were in the early 90s. So today, standing with me, on either side of me, are families who know firsthand the pain, the devastation that comes from substance abuse disorder from opioids. This addiction is a family disease, and it impacts our community. It knows no bounds. It doesn't care, like I said, what race or gender you are, where you come from. It's cruel, it's deadly. It can strike unexpectedly. And I want to be clear that throwing money at a problem doesn't just fix it. But it does get our community off on a journey now to get us that much closer to healing the devastation, the ravaging of our community caused by opioids. It will hold accountable those who distributed this very dangerous narcotic and drug to our loved ones. But most importantly, it's going to provide resources to us. We talked about the unspeakable human suffering, a wrong that absolutely no money can make right. However, the financial costs to the taxpayers can be made right. This is why the money that comes from this settlement is going to be used for treatment, prevention, to help people recover from opioid use disorder, and support governments and nonprofit programming working to combat this issue. Because unlike the tobacco settlements in the 90s, I'm incredibly proud to say that this is not going to be like the tobacco settlements, which allow government agencies to spend the money without restrictions, to even fill potholes in the roads. This money in this agreement secures the funding to be directly correlated to opioid abuse. And while today is just the first step of many, this is bringing much needed relief and resources to Maricopa County and to Arizona. There are two people that I would like to call up here to make brief statements to you to help provide some context to this monumental resolution. The first of which is Tom Liddy. He is the head of our civil division that has spearheaded the effort to help reach this resolution with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, with the help of outside counsel, and our leadership here in Maricopa County. Also that we will call up Mr. Kim Humphrey. He is the director of a nonprofit organization called Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, and somebody who has truly experienced the devastating impacts of this epidemic firsthand. Before I turn it over to them and then we will answer some questions, I want to thank members of my office, the County Attorney's Office, Maricopa County Government, and of course our Attorney General, Mr. Brenovich, who is helping us resolve this case and lead the effort with the other 14 counties that are involved. The other 14 county attorneys have also been instrumental in their jurisdictions. And I'm proud to say that when I called a meeting of them and led our group in the spring of 2020, we all knew how important this was to each of our communities. Even though we might be impacted differently, it is a significant impact. And this resolution is good for our county and the state. At this time, I'd like to invite up Mr. Tom Liddy, who is head of the Civil Division of the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, followed by Mr. Kim Humphrey, the Director of Parents of Addicted Loved Ones.
Thank you. I'm Thomas Liddy, L-I-D-D-Y, and it's an honor to be part of a very large legal team that worked on this. I first want to thank Allister Adel and for her leadership. You can imagine what it's like to bring 15 county attorneys together under one roof and to try to come up with a common strategy to deal with this, and which all had to happen before we could deal directly with our Attorney General, who showed great leadership in this litigation. That had to happen because it was a demand of the defendants. We first got involved in this matter in 2014, where we retained outstanding outside counsel Keller Rohrbach. I want to thank Gretchen Capio and all the attorneys from Keller Rohrbach that helped us with this. The turning point after many years was when a courageous federal judge in Ohio made the ruling that all of the data that pharmaceutical companies are required to keep by federal law, they've collected it all, but they didn't share it with anyone because they consider it trade secrets. That federal judge said they had to share it with the plaintiffs in a discovery matter. And I was shocked, if not appalled, to see the data, how much information pharmaceutical companies and distributors of the pharmaceutical companies, opioids, knew what was going on across the country. That was the game changer. And from there on, each state was working toward a settlement. Our defendants, these major distributors of opioids in America, said to Arizona, we won't settle unless everybody is on board, or almost everybody. Maricopa County had its own lawsuit. Other counties had their lawsuits. Other cities had their lawsuits. Under the leadership of Allister Adel, we all came together and came up to speak with one voice. That one voice of 15 counties was able to work with our Attorney General and his staff and come up with a One Arizona plan. And we're a few steps away from complete resolution, but we're there. We're going to get there. Today was monumental. The largest county in Arizona, the fourth largest county in the United States, has signed on to this settlement. Arizona is way out in front of this, thanks to Allister Adel, the other county attorneys, and our Attorney General, and we're going to move forward. And it's just been a real honor as an attorney to work on this matter for 7.5 years to see if we can just take one step to start helping to alleviate some of the tremendous and catastrophic and cascading harm that comes to families such as these and all across the country due to opioid abuse. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Kim Humphrey, and that's H-U-M-P-H-R-E-Y. And I am honored to stand up here and speak on behalf of families about this issue. I could talk about this from a law enforcement perspective, as I spent 32 years in a local law enforcement agency here in the Valley. But I want to talk to you as a father, as a dad. And I will tell you that when my wife and I, who have 2 sons, were sitting at home one day, having an enjoyable evening, watching TV, the phone rings, and this woman on the other line tells my wife that she's very concerned and she wants to tell her something. And my wife is like, what is it? And she says, well, I don't know how exactly to explain this, but my daughter, who's friends with your son, is very concerned that he may overdose and die. Our son is 15. He doesn't have any problems. He doesn't smoke cigarettes. He's not in trouble at school. We have no idea that there's any problem. And somebody just called us and said, your son may die. And we are completely in shock. And not only in shock, but in denial that no, they called the wrong family. They've got the wrong people. Well, needless to say, we went through the process of asking him for a drug test. And to our surprise, a shock. He comes back positive for opioids. And we can't even imagine how he got them. We can't even imagine where he got them. We can't understand this. And of course, we immediately, as parents, jump in and we try and do everything. We take him to the doctor. We take him to a counselor. We start doing everything we can think of to solve this problem. And oddly, my son tells me one day that he says, after I took that first pill, that prescription pill that somebody gave me, that I found, he said, I had to have it again. I didn't understand that. I don't understand that at all. It doesn't affect me that way. And he says, no, I had to. Well, all of our attempts to try and change this did not make any difference. I mean, everything that we did, it seemed to just continue to get worse. And I want to be very clear that in our case, and it's not like every case, there was no serious trauma. There was no drama. We were from my terms, an idealistic family having, a wonderful life, and all of a sudden this disruption, this nightmare experience starts to happen. My kids are not morally bankrupt. They're not the kind of kids that don't know right from wrong. They do know right from wrong. And as a matter of fact, I can tell you now that I've experienced this over these last number of years, that that's the case for all of these families. They raise their children to understand what they should and shouldn't do. That's not the problem. When these drugs get a hold of them, it changes everything. And so I will fast forward. We spent 10 years trying to deal with this with our older son. And during that time, our younger son, who was doing really well, went off to college, suddenly one day comes home, drops out of school, and to our shock, is now doing the same thing as his brother. I will tell you that we felt like we were the worst parents on the planet. We felt alone. We did not know what to do. We were ashamed. We started to isolate. We tried everything we could to solve this problem, and nothing worked. And one day, my wife, after almost 10 years, found an organization in town that was meeting called PAL, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. We went to a meeting. We realized at that point that we were not alone. We suddenly started to realize that maybe there was hope. And as we started to attend for a while, somebody asked us if we would facilitate a meeting on our side of town, and we started doing that. And it's been over 9.5 years, and we have done that. So I have met many parents, and I can tell you that from all of their perspectives, none of them expected this, and none of them thought this would happen in their families. And in 2014, I had left law enforcement. The founder of PAL in a local area here asked us as parents if we would take over this organization because he saw the need for it outside of just Maricopa County, outside of just Arizona. And we did so. And over the last 5 or 6 years, it has grown now to having a presence in nearly 40 states in the United States. Why? Because of the need. Because there are parents and families that are suffering all over this country, all over the world, frankly, with this issue. And so when I was a police officer and I used to go around on the corners, I would see people standing out there. I can tell you that it's not hard to distinguish those that you believe that are on drugs. And I would look at them, and to be perfectly honest, I felt like these individuals probably need to be arrested and they need to go to jail because they shouldn't be standing out here and doing that. That's the first thing that used to go through my mind. Can I tell you now what the first thing that goes through my mind when I see people like I did on the way here, like I did coming into this building? I see them standing out there, and I say to myself, that is somebody's son, that is somebody's daughter. Their parents are heartsick, probably don't know where they are, probably don't know what to do, just like we were. I don't see people that way as hopeless. I see hope in the fact that I know that things can change. Please don't see them as hopeless. Things got terrible for us. We had multiple incidents of overdoses. We had homelessness for years at a time. I would get calls from my local law enforcement friends telling me that they just found my son living in the bushes in a park. They were getting arrested. They were part of the criminal justice system. Yes, we were in this building dealing with some of the problems that were going on. It was just continuing, and it just continued to get worse. And I started to believe that they were never going to make. I was absolutely convinced, and my wife was convinced that they were not going to survive. They were going to die. And if they didn't die, they would be in prison for the rest of their lives. But you know what? We started to learn. We started to become educated. We started to change in the way we were responding. We didn't know how to do that. We needed help. And there wasn't a lot out there. And so when we started to learn and we started to change, we started to have healthier responses. We started to see different responses from our sons. And that eventually led to them seeking real recovery. So after 10 years of all of this, eventually it started to change. And even though we had thought for sure that they would not survive, we were convinced that we were just going to end up as parents that had two sons that were either in prison or, like I said, had lost their lives. But you know what? They did find recovery. They did find sobriety. And it changed. And they sought that out. And now they have 8 years almost of that sobriety and recovery. And my sons, who, yes, were involved in the criminal justice system, and yes, who had a serious problem and who were involved in all kinds of issues that I'm sure that they wish they had never been involved in, and the hospital stays and the overdoses and all those other things. But you know what? 8 years they've been in recovery. They're law-abiding citizens. They own their own homes. I have an amazing daughter-in-law now. I have a beautiful granddaughter. I have a life, and my wife have a life that we never, ever thought we would have. My younger son is an IT professional. Our older son works in recovery at Calvary Healing Center in town here. It's been there almost 60 years providing service. And you know, people do get better. And I get it that not everyone does, because guess what? In our meetings, we've lost many, many lives. And we've dealt with that from sitting with these parents who've lost their lives. And both of my sons have lost so many friends that we've lost count. And they will tell you that they don't know why they survived. They don't know why they lived through it and their friend did not. They were doing the same things. But there are good programs out there. There are ways to find hope. There are ways to get better. And in reality, we can keep people from ending up in the situations that they are. And so, like I said, you know, my son works at Calvary Healing Center. My friend Josh is up here today. He runs a program called Pathways in Tempe. They do amazing work with young people. There are good programs out there that can help people. But in reality, we need a holistic approach. Families matter. Families have influence. They can help. They can be a part of that solution. And this settlement can be used to support that holistic approach of dealing with this and finding ways to help all of our families find that health and hope and healing that I know is out there. I promise that there is hope. I tell this to families all the time. To reiterate what was just said, I was at our PAL meeting last night. My wife and I facilitated that meeting. 70% of the people in that meeting, when they were introducing themselves, stated that their loved one was currently using fentanyl in some form or another. It's devastating. It's continuing to devastate our communities. Both of my sons ended up using heroin, IV heroin users. It was mind-boggling that we would end up dealing with something like this. But at the end of the day, they got better. Things are so much better today. But it's not that way for everybody. But just in case I'm standing up here and you're thinking, well, you painted a really good picture. Is it really true? You know, is that really what it looks like? I thought it was better if I just said, well, they're up here with me. So my wife is right here. This is my son, Sean. That is my son, Andrew. And I could not be more proud of my two sons today. And I believe that what they went through turned them into the men that they are. So I am thankful again to be here. I truly appreciate this opportunity to be a part of this solution. And I look forward to the work that's going to be done to help our families and our communities all over this county and, of course, all over our state and hopefully throughout this country. So thank you very much. And I truly, truly, truly am believing that there is hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Tom, for your remarks. This agreement is bringing roughly $550 million to our community for prevention, treatment, and services for those directly impacted by the opioid epidemic. I want to thank the Board of Supervisors, our outside counsel, our civil litigation team, but most importantly, the members of the community that are dealing with this, fighting this battle every single day. The survivors, those in recovery, those in our nonprofits, in law enforcement, our nurses, our doctors, our school teachers, every single one of us that are impacted by this. And in particular, those that have survived, go every single day and have the bravery to come in here today and stand alongside me. I appreciate each one of you. With that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Sure.
Yes.
Can you talk about how the settlement money is going to affect groups like PAL, people trying to have those kind of outcomes like the Humphrey family has had?
The settlement money is going to impact both nonprofits that are working in this space to get services to those that are directly impacted, whether they're in active addiction, whether they're in recovery. But we can also use some of this money to provide resources for, housing, job training, things like that, as long as it's directly related to the opioid epidemic in our community and not just going to fill a pothole in the road like the settlement was from the tobacco settlements back in the 90s. Yes.
Madam County Attorney, more than $500 million you're receiving. It's mind-boggling, that amount of money. How much profit was the pharmaceutical companies making in Maricopa County dispensing opioids?
Well, I can tell you that it is a monumental settlement, as you mentioned. The fact that our county alone will be seeing around $80 million at least from this settlement, again, that's going to go directly back into our community to correspond with this epidemic. Sometimes we have the unfortunate duty to deal with a problem in our community where money is the driving factor, where this is profitable. These were businesses, distributors, manufacturers that are making money off of addiction to unsuspecting people. We do not have the exact number that they made from profit from what their business was pushing this drug, nor do we have an exact amount, a quantification on things such as heroin. But it's the unseen quantified number, I think, that really truly impacts us in our community as taxpayers, as fellow citizens, with loved ones, and in law enforcement.
So just for my clarification, 550 plus million, that's statewide, 80 million for Maricopa?
You are correct. So the overall settlement amount is for all 15 counties, city and state as well, and it's going to be divided up proportionately.
Can you better explain what you meant by throwing money at a problem and better help the community understand that if this is prescription medication, what was the deal? What was the big deal in regard? Because a lot of people might think addiction means that person on the street corner. They don't maybe not understand the correlation.
So when I use the metaphor of throwing money at a problem, I was talking about that, you can't just give money to a situation and expect it to magically resolve, to fix the underlying issues that are there. You have to put that money to good use. We can't, spend it wastefully. We can't spend it in programs that really aren't going to directly impact either prevention or treatment or the healing path that is ahead for the opioid epidemic in our community. There's no way to quantify the damage that has been done. However, what I can say is when we're looking at how this money is going to be distributed, there are so many people working in this space, nonprofits and government, that care about our community, that want to see us move forward and heal from this. And we have to work collaboratively to be able to look at solutions for this long term, for those that want to do better and be better.
Another question. We live in a society where prescription drugs are pushed on us every day on the radio, on television. Anything as part of this that might prevent us from falling into the same problem issue in the future? Drug companies are pushing their drugs, and it's a domino effect, and they're going to the doctor's offices, and they're pushing the drugs. What do you see for our future?
When we talk about our future, and the question was related to how drugs are being pushed upon us by doctors, and we should trust our medical professionals. They are keenly aware of the collateral impacts of certain drugs that are addictive. It's always, good practice for any of us to ask questions. But when we recognize signs of addiction or suffering in our loved ones, our friends, our family, to be involved with them and speak up, provide resources that are out there in the community, but to make sure that we're going to reputable resources to get help, treatment, guidance, resources, education, whatever it might be. It's unfortunate that something that we would look to for pain relief is something that could ultimately cause so much harm. It's unfortunate that people were preyed upon in this regard. The other part of the equation, as there's been two questions alluding to this isn't just prescriptions. The base of this drug is also part of the heroin epidemic that is out there, the street version of the opioids, that is cheaper and easier to get. And we rely heavily upon law enforcement to assist us in abating the rampant spread of that drug, the drug users, to get them treatment, to help them be back contributing members of society, for those who have committed serious crimes, to hold them accountable but make people whole, but also so that we can help law enforcement take down the root core of the illegal street drugs as well.
Gentleman over here was talking about just when these books were opened up about 8 years ago, the appalling things that he saw that the drug companies were doing. Are there things that are now the drug companies have changed and are not allowed to do? And what are some of these just horrible things that the drug companies were, practices that they were doing?
So during the course of the investigative phase over the last several years, a lot of information was uncovered about sort of the business model, if you will, of how this came to pass. What I'd like to do is turn it over to Tom Liddy, who's the chief of our civil division, who really was at its core with this case, digging through it with our outside counsel and working with stakeholders to really understand the business that spawned the ravaging on our community. So, Mr. Liddy, if you're willing.
Thank you. Well, it's really quite a horrible story. And as I mentioned, it has a cascading effect. People die in America every day from this epidemic, but it's not always because they took an OxyContin pill. I have two friends of mine who've lost children to this. One, for example, fell, and he broke his jaw, and he broke a bone in his face. He went and he had surgery for it, and the doctor prescribed OxyContin to him. Fine. Well, a year and a half later, he's addicted to heroin because he couldn't get OxyContin anymore. He got to heroin. One morning, got up, got his heroin fix, and died. And I'm 3 or 4 years into this litigation. I have nothing to offer my friend except hugs and prayers. The pharmaceutical business in this country and the distributors of pharmaceuticals are required by federal law to keep certain data. And they keep that data meticulously. But that data is secret. They share it with the DEA. They share it with the federal government. They don't share it with their competitors. When we were able to see that data, what that showed us was an enormously disproportionate amount of manufacturing and distributing of pharmaceuticals with opioids in them that could possibly righteously serve a small community. One example in West Virginia. Far too many pills being prescribed out there that could possibly treat all the people with injuries, shoulder surgery, back pain, teeth problems, add it all up. No way. The numbers were upside down. The pharmaceutical companies knew it. The distributors knew it. And that should have raised an alarm. Instead, it goes on and on and on for years. Now, this is just one settlement, and there will be many more. This is going to be estimated over $580 million for the state of Arizona. $80 million, maybe a little more, in our county alone. That's nowhere near enough to address all of the harms that are caused by fentanyl, heroin, OxyContin, and other things. We've got fabulous nonprofit groups that are helping people. It's a lifelong struggle. The county itself, that's why we were a plaintiff, spends a fortune. Medical examiner's office, the jails, the sheriff's department, the prosecutions, health department. So one of the things we had in common with the defendants, the distributors of pharmaceuticals, and the attorney general and the county attorney all agreed that these settlement funds must be directly used to affect the harm of this opioid epidemic. And so all of it is very tightly written into this agreement, the One Arizona plan, to make sure that it all directly affects that. So that's one thing that's very different from this than tobacco. Thank you.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
Kind of summarize, what kind of message are you hoping this settlement and other future settlements sends to pharmaceutical companies about you will be held accountable, or what kind of message you hope this sends?
Well, the question is about what kind of message to send, and the message should go out on different levels. The first one is, if you are going to wreak havoc in our community, whether it's through the veil of a business, or if it's some other means disguised as a business, we will hold you accountable. We see the faces out there that have suffered from this. We see how it has impacted our community on so many levels for generations, as also evidenced by the brave people standing next to me here today. The message is that we care about our community. We recognize these trends. We stepped into the space to make sure that we navigated this with integrity, to make sure that people were held accountable, and that people, for the most part that we can do, are given the opportunity to be whole. Again, this is going to focus on prevention, treatment, and also, most importantly, we have to realize that taking apart the business of this, again, is not just throwing money at it, like I mentioned. This is a step forward. This is a step in the right direction on a journey for our county of healing. Where the county attorney's office plays a part to it, to conclude, is that we have a duty in this society to protect victims, to hold people accountable. But under my administration, I truly believe that those who want to do better and be better should be given the opportunity to do so. We have already set out on this path under my administration, and the funds from this will help us expand programs such as diversion to get people the help that they need, so they're not going to prison for an addiction, especially now from opioid use. This is a significant settlement, a significant impact, and a significant benefit and step towards healing for our community. One thing that I'd like to share with all of you, many of you who are standing in this room and even in the community, you work in the media and deliver critical information to our community. One of the people in the professional side of this that you've worked with is standing to my right, Jennifer Lewer, my communications director. She wasn't aware that I was going to call her out, but I tend to do that. When I started on this journey to become county attorney, I knew that I wanted to do things differently. I knew that I wanted to take a treatment-first approach to help reduce recidivism in our county, to do our part as one of the largest jurisdictions in the United States. And a lot of that does focus on getting help for people who have a substance abuse issue. That's why we focus on things like diversion for those that want to do better and be better, and they should be given the opportunity to do so. And in the course of this journey, knowing that this litigation was unfolding, I knew that I had to bring together the county attorneys and the other stakeholders to have those discussions, which resulted in us standing here today. But there's the human factor that we cannot ignore, we cannot forget. We all probably know somebody that is either directly or indirectly impacted by this epidemic. And when I sat and met with Jennifer Lewer in a coffee shop, before I had the honor of being appointed as your county attorney, I learned about her struggle with her amazing daughter, Caitlin, who's also standing here today, about how drugs can impact any one of us at any time. It does not discriminate. And it doesn't always impact somebody that's the bad person. And we have to recognize that as a society if we are to move forward and heal. And this settlement is a step in that direction to get us there. So I'm proud of the work that we've been doing. I'm grateful for those that are willing to speak up and step into this space, whether it be the lawyers, nonprofits, law enforcement, survivors, because this is a monumental day for our community. Thank you.
There are copies of the One Arizona report, and I can share the stats that she spoke about in her speech. If you guys send me an email, and I can send you those stats if you like. Miriam, her son is in recovery, so I don't know if he wants separate parents or. Mary, yeah, come on. Either way, we'll let you.